Right. You're live.
We're live? Right, live? Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Kittredge. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm working on local food economies, reconnecting farmers with society, and figuring out how can we, well, basically achieve three things. The first one is, how do we pay our farmers a decent amount of money for the beautiful work they do? And I always say in Dutch, we say, how does his work end up in his pocket? And then the second part is, how do we then offer our consumers food on their plate that they actually know where it comes from, that's A, and B, what the effect is of what they eat from an economical, ecological, and also social perspective. So that's the second big question. And then there's the third one. So if we empower our local farmer community doing the right thing and pay them for it, and if we then give the consumer an instrument at hand so he can pay for the reward that the farmer needs, but also understands what the effect of his food is on his own life and environment and body and even his economy, then how can we, the third states, convince our governments to take the right decisions, getting our legal frameworks in a way that, well, the farmer gets a good price, the consumer gets food that, well, empowers everything, and they can, well, lay their heads and do their work as well. And that's basically to bring together two favorite visionary people that are able, and I will show a picture first about the context of what's going on, and then leave it at that. That's this picture. So at this current moment, we have well, people that pull the plugs of power that, well, don't do the right thing. And there's an orange guy over there. Well, let's not call his name out, but, well, he's making sure there's a lot of shit on our plate now. And then we have, like, on the right side, this is the Dutch farmer community protesting against, well, not having a decent wage and not having any power in the decisions that being made concerning them. So it's not the food that is the business model, they are the business model. That's wrong. And then we have like these massive amount of communities looking for solutions and that need good food. And that's a big challenge. So how do we feed our people? How do we make sure that the farmers get appreciated? And how do we cope with, well, the orange guy there? And to put it simple, if we don't fix our food chain from farm to fork, and this is the Dutch, well, reality in 2009. So we had 65,000 farmers in Netherlands in 2009, and now we have, I think it's around 84,000 farmers in the Netherlands. So this is a view of the world. This is not only happening in the Netherlands, it's happening everywhere. Farmers quit. Politicians are looking for solutions or whatever they do. And I know that here in the Middle East, we have a government that is willing to take great decisions that can lead. And how do we make sure that our shelves in the supermarket get packed with good food? Because we have farmers looking for solutions, not only what they feed their animals, but also what is in their shopping bag. We have technology on horticulture and food production here in our midst that can solve the problem, but basically it's a design of how we envision our cities of the future. How do we build them using technology, but especially empowering communities of farmers. So our youth understands that becoming a farmer, working in food is an honorable, decent job. And in every culture it states that if you farm, and you grow good food on healthy soils, you have the most precious job that you can imagine. And with me, I have two interesting people. So this discussion is actually about technology, how we see the true value of food and the content in its food as part of the economic reality. for farmers, but also for me as a consumer, and how technology like blockchain technology can support a value and values-based food system. Value is about facts, and values is about human connection, and that's what we want. So I would love to give you, with that context, the floor. Please then explain who you are, what you do, and how you see ecological, economical, and social value come together in solving this, well, relatively simple problem.
Thank you, Lord. An honor to be here. Just quickly, a bit of background. I'm an American. I grew up on a small organic farm. My parents were actively involved in the organic movement starting in the 80s. So for 40 years, I've been part of the alternative ag, sustainable ag movement community. As I grew up and set about my own path and career in life, I as well attempted to be a farmer. Similarly struggled, as many do, with economic viability. I realized that the health of my crops was connected to my economic viability, and the health of my crops was low. And I also began to understand that there's a variation in nutrient levels in food, which connects to the health of my plants and the health of the soil and my economic viability and the health of my consumers. And so, as I was able to begin to shift and improve soil health on my farm and improve economic viability, and have free time to begin to share with my friends and neighbors, I started educating about these things. And I've been running an NGO for the last 15 years, working on that, improving soil health, improving nutrient levels in food. And in the past 8 years, we've been doing a lot of research to assess what is that variation in nutrient levels in food and build standards around it. So our organization, we've coined this term nutrient density to refer to that variation. We've done it on multiple continents, thousands of samples, thousands of soils, hundreds of farms. Understanding that nutrient massive, 5x, 10x, 20x, 40x, depending on which crop and which nutrient we're looking at. Identifying that it foundationally seems to be the function of the microbiome that is causal in that variation, and prototyping instrumentation that can be used by the consumer at point of purchase to assess nutrient levels proactively. So the concept being, whether you're talking about potatoes or rice or beef or milk or apples, doesn't really matter what the crop is. If you have multiple choices on the shelf, they are not uniform from a nutritional standpoint. And the concept being, if we can give the consumer, the person who's buying the food, the ability to discern, this one is 20 out of 100, this was 40, this was 80. Our thought is the incentive of the consumer is going to be to choose that which is most nutritious for themselves and their family. So we've been working on this. We've prototyped this process out with beef over the past 4 years on 4 continents around the planet, identifying effectively a series of biomarkers that instrumentation can be calibrated to. And it looks like in the near future, one of the cameras in your phone will be a spectrometer. You can open up the app, and you can literally take your phone, flash a light at the samples of beef, at the samples of potato, or cucumber, or apple, and see 20 out of 100, 40 out of 100, 80 out of 100. So our thought is using economics as a lever, using the incentive of the person buying food to support their family in being most well, we can shift the dynamics in the food supply quite profoundly to focus on overall human health, which we think connects powerfully to soil health, ecosystem function, and farm viability. This does require a bunch of science. It requires tech and data in the back end. We're working on this project now globally. This is the 6th continent we've presented this plan at. We have our draft treaties here at the front for anyone who's interested in reviewing them and offering commentary and suggestions. The concept is, this is a project that should engage insight and comments from agronomists, from nutritionists, from biochemists, from microbiologists, from chefs, from governmental agents, etc. We want the people who eat food, everybody in the supply chain, to be able to engage in this process of open data collection and definition. Foundationally, we're not just looking to identify what that nutrient variation is and build a 1 to 100 standard in each crop. We also want to understand what are the causal factors. What are the dynamics that the farmer needs to do to shift soil health, to modulate fertility program, to optimize crop quality. And the more we can have an open, transparent, global ecosystem of data that is not proprietarily controlled and monetized, but is there to support all producers, everyone in the supply chain openly, the more we can accomplish that dynamic where overall the nutritional quality of food is increased for everyone planet-wide. So I'm very happy to be here with House, who's got a key piece of that tech platform, that dynamic where we can actually have an open, shared, collective, collaborative framework through which we all are learning together. We're not monetizing, proprietarily controlling data. We're not trying to, optimize profit for suppliers of products. We're trying to help farmers identify which products, which protocols, which pieces of equipment are most optimal to achieve these overall system results. I think this is a really key piece of the puzzle, is this concept that we're in it for the collective, for mutual empowerment, not trying to monetize and optimize profit for large players. Let there be competition in the market, but let that competition be based on collective self-interest and mutual insight collectively garnered. Just to speak to that framework you've been building, House, it's central to the success of this endeavor.
Yes, thank you, Dan. Thanks, Mark. My name is Oscar Oscarsson. I'm Icelandic, bit Dutch, in Mexico, now based in Switzerland. I represent the BSV Association. We're a non-profit focusing on education and technology around blockchain. And the reality is that we actually have to re-educate around blockchain. It's been around the block for 15, 16 years now. And people have started to associate it with monetary value, with store of value, and funny pictures that you put online. Whereas the reality is that if you go back to the core basics of what a blockchain is, it is essentially distributed ledger technology. And in my time as a primary teacher also, I had to explain to 10, 11-year-olds what a blockchain is, and it actually helps to make it understandable. If you go back to the core, it's essentially distributed ledger, and ledger is nothing more than a notebook. So essentially what you have is a notebook where everyone can write in, but nobody owns it. So it's owned essentially by whoever is running these nodes, and it's obviously a network of computers that are connected to each other. And anyone can write in it, but nobody can then change it once that page has been closed, which means that nobody controls the data that is in this blockchain. Right? It's intangible. And the challenge that we've been doing at the BFA Association is how can you make sure that this blockchain scales enough and attracts enough value to businesses that actually they can start using it. So there's two main aspects to that, or three actually. One is the stability, that anything you put in this notebook will still be valid 10 years from now. The second one is scalability, which we've been trying to do with the protocol that we're advocating, to actually be able to make sure that it can process as many transactions as possible. There's a lot of blockchains out there are for payments, etc. You're thinking of transaction throughputs of, say, 10,000, 20,000 transactions per second. But if you really want to enable truly the whole global economy, you need to go way beyond that. So we've achieved that with the latest software. And then the third one is actually to make it low cost, because at the end of the day, we need to think of it not from a technological perspective, but actually from a business perspective. What is in it for me? as a business to start adopting this technology, because it's been here around the block, and we're convinced that blockchain has a very significant role to play in transforming the way businesses operate, but also a very humble role as basically just the underlying infrastructure, essentially the plumbing, which enables this single source of truth, this ledger that anyone can write on and store their value. And so if we think of it, it can be applied in any industry. In fact, we're working together with companies in the healthcare sector, in supply chain, and in retail. Obviously, with payment, the settlement of the instant settlement of blockchain makes it very attractive for any payment, also in farming. And now with both Mark and Dan, we're now working together on building out the first real use cases within agri-tech, showcasing the true value of blockchain as the underlying technology that enables this all. Because think of it as moving away from a horse to a car. We are now used to the technology that can do certain things, and we are very restricted in the way businesses operate. But now we're actually having a paradigm shift where by having data that is verifiable, tamper-proof, but also it's just this everything in one single source, which enables use cases that weren't possible before. And that's where the humble sort of position of blockchain is this underlying infrastructure. And the biggest challenge that we as an industry have, and I'll be very honest about that, is try to make it understandable. So for example, I had to teach it to 11-year-old, but I also still have to teach it to politicians and policymakers and business officials what the true value is. And the only way you can do that is by moving away from PowerPoint and actually start building applications that are meaningful. So our main focus at the PSC Association is building together with and for businesses to make sure that the value of this truth and transparency and trustworthy layer resonates with them. And so very happy with Mark and Dan. We'll go into that over the next, say, 45 minutes. I think we're left after these 3 monologues, but we'll try to keep it exciting. So thanks.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So what I think is really interesting from an economical perspective for farmers. Certainly we are here in an environment where we help farmers with technology to produce more and better and cheaper, and et cetera, et cetera. But I imagine if we would be able, with the beautiful work that you do, Dan, to really monitor the true content in an apple or a chicken, a piece of meat, and that you solve for people already. The publication is here, so people can see the proof. So how do we then, and I'm understanding the blockchain not as an expert, but I think I do know that if you have a bookkeeper that is not corrupt, and you're able to share the information of the true content in food, and then, well, talking about the future, having a mobile phone, a cell phone with a light bulb on it, and then imagine that hundreds of thousands of consumers go to the supermarket and flash it at a piece of chicken or meat, and then get instant feedback on how many nutrients are in that crop. And then you're able to, through the technology of blockchain, to pay the reward instantly to the farmer for the actual content, the nutrients in its meat. That's what is on the table here. So is this something that can we do this then? Is it possible?
Yeah, this is what we've been working on for the last 8 years from a scientific standpoint, verifying. We had a first initial few questions we started with in 2017 when we started this work. The first question was, is it possible to build a thing that you could hold in your hand and you can afford, that with a flash of light could tell you what something's made up of? Because that sounds like Star Trek. Well, it's called spectroscopy, that's the science. We have these, the Hubble Space Telescope, for example, can tell us what a star 4 billion light years away is made up of. 4 billion light years is a long distance. We have never sent a probe past 1 light day. The thing that's gone farthest away from Earth so far is still less than 1 light day away. and yet we know exactly what a star 4 billion light years away is made up of. Not because we went out there and sampled it, because we took a picture of the light coming off of it, and we looked closely at that picture, and we can see the frequencies, and those frequencies are actually coming from individual nutrients. We can say, or elements, copper vibrates at this frequency, and zinc vibrates at that frequency, and we can see what something's made up of based on the color of light that comes off of it. So if we can do that 4 billion light years away, can we do that 1 millimeter away? At a consumer price point. And that's what we verified in our paper we published in 2021 in Nature Scientific Reports, was yes, at a consumer price point, you can hold something in your hand, and with a flash of light, you can read nutrients in food non-invasively. You can literally go to the shop, flash a light and say, mediocre, better, horrible. I'm going to take the better one off the shelf and leave the other two there. The second thing we tested was the variation of nutrient levels. It's massive. We found the connection to causal factors. It's level of life in the soil. Now, the real question for farmers, if we actually are able to complete this research, develop calibrations, actually say, this is 20 out of 100 per potato, that's 40, that's 80, and get those into a phone, into a sensor in a phone, the question for the farmer is, how do I take the 20s I'm producing right now and improve them to 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s? The agricultural research frameworks and protocols that have been performed by universities and governments for the last number of decades have been primarily focusing on single factor analysis. Let's change this one thing in a side-by-side replicated randomized trial and see what that correlates to. Well, biological systems are multi-factor systems. There's hundreds or thousands of different dynamics shifting. We need to actually engage every single farm as though it's a research farm, capture as many metadata points as possible, identify causal patterns, and support everyone equally in the process of being empowered. That can't happen openly and in a trusted fashion without the kind of distributed ledger we're talking about here. We need to engage our research and our science and our education process as though we are all in this together, to support each other mutually and symbiotically. I propose that's the model of nature. Well, nature says the more diversity there is, the more symbiosis there is, the more everyone succeeds. The dominant paradigm we have now is proprietary control. This is our metadata, we're taking it, we're making our algorithms, we're using that to optimize our profits and our sales. That may be good for a control dynamic, a top-down dynamic, but it doesn't actually support systemic benefit. So I like to refer to this as colonization versus indigenousness, right? We have this model of human culture of the colonizers coming in and saying, we are going to define success as us having more than you, lots of people of the underclass who are struggling, and a few people in the overclass that are comfortable. Now, that may be, enjoyable for a few, but we can see what's happening to culture, to the environment, to any number of systemic dynamics. And you can see it's a dead-end path. So how do we engage a process where we can facilitate mutual symbiotic empowerment? We need to actually open up our processes of science and data and algorithms and monitoring and metrics and mutual empowerment. And I think this is a foundational piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, thanks. So we now know that it's actual doable in my hand to scan food and address each piece of food on its nutrients, and then we have blockchain technology, and we have
I'll just say one thing.
Yeah.
We've shown that in principle it's possible.
Yeah.
But to accomplish it, there's still a couple steps left. And this is where we're at. You can't say this carrot is better than that carrot until you've engaged a properly sophisticated, comprehensive global science project where you're looking at thousands of samples of carrots from all continents, from different genetics and soil types and management practices and fertility programs. And you've looked at the microbiome, the biochemistry, and the human health trials. You've overlaid the fertility programs. Only when you've looked at all that together and been able to come up with that 1 to 100 standard can you actually engineer the sensors that should be in the phone? So we've proven principle, but it's not like the sensors are in your phone now, and we don't actually have the definitions now. This is the hurdle we're working on. This is the next step. So just so we're clear for the audience, this is where we're engaging feedback and commentary from anyone who has knowledge and perspective and thinks they can offer something that we haven't thought about yet. We are extraordinarily receptive to that.
Okay. Because it's my vision. I do a lot of work with local farmers, and we hear that, yeah, some of them they are organic, some of them aren't organic, some are regenerative, some are more traditional farmers, and then there's more like, okay, I'm organic, so I'm better. And I look at my friends that are like more traditional farmer families that tens of generations back, and they say, well, why am I evil then? I'm a polluter. No, you know. But the problem is we have these trademarks to prove if somebody is right or wrong. But basically, if this would be the new standard, and we are actually able to transfer that data to the consumer, there will be a complete new standard on how food is appreciated. So, interesting question for you, Aus. If all these standards are there, and like 100 million people all over the world will flash the light at the crops in the supermarket to judge, what is this even possible? Because I know that AI takes on a lot of data. I know we have like YouTube also like taking a lot of data. How is this possible? Processing so many transactions from consumers that they go up to a cloud. What's your idea about that? Is that possible? Is it doable?
So in a nutshell, yes. But before going into that, I just want to go back to one basic principle of blockchain, which is also the term Web3 you may be familiar with. The idea behind that was always to empower individuals. So if you look at the Bitcoin white paper, for example, which is the most famous blockchain out there, right? It says peer-to-peer electronic cash. And because peer-to-peer and empowerment of individuals is very important. These are two aspects that are crucial, and that they fit very well in what Dan was talked about earlier, about empowering individuals and consumers, and also farmers. But at the end of the day, what you're doing with this system, which happens to run on blockchain, doesn't happen to, but you're empowering individuals because you can change the way that businesses operate. And this is just one example of how it can be done. There's multiple examples in multiple industries where this can actually be beneficial and actually change the world towards a better. And it's more of a mindset and paradigm shift that would be needed. Now coming back to your question, is it possible? Absolutely. So I'm managing director for the association. My brother, I have the fortune to work with my brother. He's the CTO at our company. And he's, over the last 2 years, also been developing the software to actually make this possible. Just to put it in perspective, this system is now capable of running up to 1 million transactions per second, and then we'll go up further at a very, very low cost. If you compare it to like Black Friday is 2 days from now, on Black Friday, Visa processes about 60,000 transactions per second, just from the payment scale, and we're levels above that in theoretical capacity, right? So at the end of the day, if 100,000, if 1 million users would start using it and putting on their identity on chain, that's another topic I'd like to go into that later. The technology is able to support. Technology should never be the hindrance. Right? It's the enabler. It's actually the model that enables it. Because what you would have is you would have thousands or millions of people that would sign up to essentially Dan's portal, and they shouldn't even need to know that it's run by blockchain. It just needs to work for them. It needs to be able to provide them the services they need to connect with other individuals, to get rewarded for their actions, or to pay for certain actions that they want to take. The fact that there's blockchain running it, it's the plumbing. Nobody knows what cable is running underneath this floor. We can walk on it, but the structure and the foundation, we don't really care about it, as long as it's safe, scalable, and stable. Right? So on that topic, it's absolutely possible. And the question becomes then a design question, and that's more always from the end user perspective, in this case Dan, and association or you with common sources, what is the added value of blockchain? Why shouldn't I just use a database? Right? And that's where the whole multifaceted aspect as well of the language where you can implement blockchain comes in. The first one being identity itself. You can actually log in a self-sovereign identity. We're used to go to the concept of Web3 was always the power of individuals. But if you go now on your phone, you use your Google login, you use your Apple login, you use your Google Pay, you use your Apple Pay, you use your Facebook login. You're locked into these essentially gatekeepers that control our identity. And they use their data, and we have no idea what they're using their data for, right? So one aspect of blockchain is having you own your own identity. So there's no lock-in, you need to ensure interoperability. You need to make sure that if you have one identity, you decide what you want to disclose. So the fact that data is on a public blockchain does not mean that anyone can access it. That's again a design question to the user. So in Dan's case, he would like to have everything as open and transparent as possible. In other cases, they may not be the case. So for private customers, it's still a very, very good mechanism to use for this. So the identity is at the core of everything, because that is essentially what drives it. And it could be the identity of an individual, it could be the identity of a package, it could be the identity of a machine. Say in high-tech spaces, you could consider spare parts. It could be the identity of a sensor, because one myth to be busted is if things are on the blockchain, doesn't mean that they're true. Because it's essentially it's shit in, shit out, essentially. So if you need to make sure that the data that is captured onto the blockchain is correct. So you need to trust in your sensors. So there's IoT devices, Internet of Things devices, and sensors are used everywhere. So blockchain is just part of the model there. And then you can think of topics like payments, means the tokenization onto a blockchain. Probably have heard about stablecoins or NFTs. Essentially what that means is that you can have a tokenization mechanism on top of things, which then you can use for rewards, etc. And the beauty of it, it's instant. There's no 3-day settlement, there's no 30-day chargeback. It's instant. And once you design that into your model and you agree on that with your users and consumers, that's where you can really make a difference. We're working also with vineyards in Virginia. There's a company out there that is tracking weather sensors. They have over 9,000 sensors over all of the vineyards who are capturing all the data on the blockchain. The biggest value of that one is not necessarily the data itself. The data itself is only of value when it becomes relevant for the business. What it does, it takes the detection of disasters, takes it down from 48 hours to 10 minutes, which means that if there's a hailstorm, if there's a storm, if there's crop damage, it doesn't take 48 hours to do that. It actually is near instant, which means that insurance premium goes down to up to 30%. And that's where the value for the farmers is then. So it's very much a design question. It's going to be unique to every business out there. But the core principles are the same. It's identity, it's data integrity, and it's, say, tokenization that enables payment, settlements, but also exchange of value, essentially.
Okay. So I have this picture of the value chain. This is actually like an analysis of, okay, we have farmers, and in the end we have consumers, we have all these chains in the middle that, well, make farmers anonymous, basically, but also data is not transferred from the farm to the consumer. And actually what we have here on the table is actually having vineyard farmers putting in sensors in their soil, and we have data models that can be added to that data flow through the chain towards the consumer. And there's a de-risking because, well, if you have a chain collaboration from farm to fork and you say, well, I cover your bag from consumer to the farmer, you don't have to have all these insurances anyway, because there's instant payment, there's no cash delay in transactions, there's all these positive elements. And I made a calculation on if you, and it was only for a small group of farmers in the Netherlands, if we would cut out like the management, the cost for cash flow, or cut out the insurances for logistics, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps in the middle. We came up until an average of 7 or 8% on the pay of a farmer that he didn't get, but he could have had, if there was a commitment from farm to farm. So that was an interesting observation. And so if we have now farmers already with sensors in their soils, we have information on what the farm practice does with the nutrient input or the development of nutrients in the product, and trace the whole product back to a consumer, you're actually saying to me that the payment of the consumer at the cash register at the supermarket could then bring the money home immediately back to the farmer, based on his effect on his soil health, on his water storage capacity, on its. So that would be a dream for a farmer, then, would it?
It would only be a dream if they're doing a good job.
Yeah.
And that's the idea, is that there's a direct economic incentive to improve ecological system function, which we understand connects directly to human health. So I think we're on the edge of talking about whether economic transactions need to operate through the current money structure. And what I understand here is the opportunity is to facilitate economic transactions directly and really help to remove a lot of the impediments that exist between human culture. There's a lot of, I would say, over-storied structures that are designed to harvest energy from humans, from culture, throughout all kinds of supply chains. And this direct, one-to-one, peer-to-peer dynamic could remove an immense amount of that. So, yeah, I see this as part of a deeper systemic cultural shift process. If you look at, we were just talking about Facebook and Instagram and things, and Google, your data is monitored, it is sold. You are, from their economic incentive, they want you on their screen, they want you seeing their ads, because that's their business model, right? That's counter to your personal incentive for well-being, to the health of your family. But that is the way the system is designed right now. So how do we systemically establish the dynamics where human culture is incentivized, where the well-being of our children, the well-being of our environment, the well-being of our deeper functions is incentivized? Foundationally, we need to remove these structures, which are in many cases unconscious, but that are constantly channeling our efforts and our energies in less than mutual benefit.
What I think is really interesting, I work with a lot of farmers in the Netherlands, and I see, okay, we now understand with this technology and the data, we can pay the farmer a better price. So it ends up in his pocket if we are able to monitor it and bring it to the market, and then also get it in the payment. And second, if we follow that up from the perspective on the plate of the consumer, he is actually able to scan and see the nutrients density in it, but also track from the plate to the farm back who made that product.
Yeah.
And what I also think is really interesting, if you get that concept a bit more deeper, also from a systemic point of view, from a governmental point of view, now we have this complex model of how subsidies are distributed, based on Excel sheets, policy briefings, and a lot of blah. That's one of the biggest frustrations of farmers that I work with. That situation, there's no, it's not a level playing field for them. So could this data, this network, and this technology reimagine how subsidies are distributed among farmers?
Let's imagine there's no subsidies. Let's imagine that it's an even playing field. I think, well, this isn't the right graphic, but the one graphic, you had tens of thousands of farms, millions of consumers, and 5 companies at the middle who were controlling everything. If the farmer is getting 6% of the retail dollar or euro or yen or whatever it is, who's getting the rest? My experience as a farmer is my cost of production goes down as my soil health improves. I don't need to charge a premium to be more economically viable. But if I, as a farmer, am only getting 6% of the retail dollar because there's all these middle people, how do we facilitate that direct to consumer, the short supply chain dynamic where we have local resilience? And it seems to me systemic empowerment across the board is possible through these tech solutions. As an absolute Luddite myself, who uses as little tech as possible, I'm not saying that I want to be using it, but I understand that the way the dominant paradigm works has many, many layers of these invisible structures which are effectively sucking, the life force out of a living system and harvesting profit. So, yeah, what's our objective? Is our objective optimizing quarterly returns for large corporations? Is our objective optimizing ecosystem function for billions of humans and trillions of other organisms? Is it holistic cultural vigor and vitality, or is it massive super yachts? We have to look at the structures of culture from a foundational standpoint and ascertain, if we're not happy with them, what are systemic solutions. We can't just complain, push on one little thing here. We need to go down to the layers, below the layers, below the layers to see foundationally what's in place, and can we build a new sandbox? The way I think of it is, we're all born into a culture. We all sort of are normalized into a certain set of dynamics. There's a bunch of cultural frames and structures which we're unconsciously engaging in. People engage their social media platform through their phone. They engage electronic transactions through their phone. You don't understand that through the current structures you're engaging, who is benefiting and how your efforts and intentions are being manipulated. If we simply build new structures that are predicated on a different set of principles that you can similarly download on your phone, the opportunity to create a new sandbox that people can move into because it's more beneficial for them provides us the capacity to, through tech, through science, through hardware, foundationally and systemically shift the way human culture is organized for mutual benefit. This is something that I see as much more deep, and the opportunities here go beyond the nutritional caliber of food for the way our culture is structurally organized. And again, back to the blockchain, well designed to facilitate the pattern of nature, the opportunities to completely shift the plumbing of nature, of the culture, are at our fingertips. It's an amazing and exhilarating opportunity.
From a governmental perspective, distribution of public funds. I know, Als, that if we have the more and more legislation is being designed on actual proof. How could we use blockchain for our governments to distribute the subsidies, but also is there some legal compliancy to do so? Because it's all about difficult documents and legal frameworks, etc. What does blockchain resolve?
Again, it depends on the needs. Again, you also need to look at it from a government perspective and what their need is. So first of all, before diving into this again, technology does not exist outside the legal framework. Code is not law, right? Code is part of the legal system. So whatever technology, if it's going to be disruptive, say you want to enable payments between person A and B, it needs to be in line with the local laws and regulations that exist around payments and movements of money, right? So that's, I think, the first big thing to talk about. And the other thing, and you mentioned the word proof, I think governments just need to look at where actually they have pain points and where there are improvements possible. But before they can actually do that, they need to be aware of what is out there, of the potential of this technology. And that's why the narrative about blockchain has shifted towards more as a payment, and we as an association are actually way more focused on the use of blockchain technology as this integrity layer in industries, say healthcare, agri-tech, supply chain, because that's where we see massive disruptive potential, really high change business models. So how governments can look at it? If you would look at proof, they would see that UNICEF, for example, is already using blockchain for A, decentralized crowdfunding, but B, also to move money from A to B to regions where it's harder to actually place money to. They're all doing it in a legally compliant way, but it's just a faster way of moving money. If you go back to the origins, again, Bitcoin, peer-to-peer, return cash, the idea was always for it to be disruptive. Right? Now it's become integrated into traditional financial systems. Banks are starting to operate ETFs, like sophisticated products around blockchain. But the origins were always disruptive, right? And it can be both. So I think a mix of both is healthy. But you think of the disruption is also in just the speed of settlement. If you need to fund a war-torn region, where you need to send funds to a war-torn region, that's gonna take ages to even get there, and then you don't know if it's gonna get in the right hands. And the beauty of blockchain is everything's traceable, so you know exactly where it's gonna be, and it's gonna be there instantly. Right? So UNICEF is already doing that. There are no other associations doing it. So government just needs to look at what's already out there, be aware, how does it apply to them, and see if they can start using it. What we always recommend, because it has a disruptive element in it, is start small. So you're not going to change the world instantly, but start with one use case. Start with a use case in a very specific niche or sector or region. See that it works. See that it actually provides the benefits that it's promising, that it lives up to its promise, and then take it from there. Because then you also get all the bugs out there. You understand that you make sure that it's compliant for everything you're doing. You de-risk it. Right? You de-risk the large-scale approach of it. But the opportunities are endless. Now we're just talking about how you can do subsidies. You can do accounting, conciliation, and essentially you can get rid of every spreadsheet out there because it's essentially instant and tamper-proof. So there's no need for big end-of-year reconciliation processes. You can do instant tax settlements. Like the opportunities are endless. So that's just one, and then just need to see where the pain points are, fix it, start small, and scale up.
Another interesting reflection is you look at so we have the government and we have the market and we have farmers and consumers, but they're looking at the role of retail in this matter. So we have empty shelves in Corona time. Integrate their data models on nutrient density by applying this technology. Dan, what's your idea on that one?
Categorically. Yeah, that's the opportunity, is you can track everything all the way through and know where it came from. And our thought is, you don't actually even need the blockchain for the consumer to assess the quality of the food. If you have the sensor and the algorithm in the app, certainly it's wonderful to be able to track that and monitor it and confirm that it was there. But absolutely, yes.
So we could have in the supermarket like a basic price level for beef, let's say €2.50 for an ounce. And then you can vary the pricing based on the actual nutrients in it. And let's say, okay, this is what the supermarket gets as a price. A baseline price, cost out the base, a little bit of profit. And then there's an add-on on nutrients, and that gets transferred directly, immediately, instantly, as soon as it hits the register to the farm. What would happen? Yeah.
Again, I haven't thought about it in that fashion. Where I've come as a farmer is, if I'm actually working with nature, my costs are lower. So we don't need to charge premiums for improved quality. We can actually outcompete the bad quality. So our thought is, and I think early on in this process, people will be wanting to charge premiums, and some people will be willing to pay premiums for improved nutritional caliber. Our thought is, there's billions of people on this planet, and it's not just a structure to support the well-being of those who can afford it. We want to facilitate a dynamic for the well-being of all. And if we're going to be always talking about premiums for better quality, then we have the issue of the billions of people who don't have sufficient resource. I would argue it sure looks like as farmers begin to dial in their protocols and their practices based on their shared understandings of how nature works and what their plants need and what their soils need, their cost of production will go down. And so those who are not working in harmony with nature will be out-competed because they will be a less economically viable model. So that's why I'm envisioning the process.
I think it goes back to, as you're already the light years ahead of it as well. I think it goes back to the disruptor versus integrated, right? At the end of the day, it's economic, it's basically economic. So if I can get better food, I can prove I can get better food at a better price at another location, that's where I'm going to do my shopping. If that's a farmer, you basically cut out all the supply chains and the farmer will get more. But then again, what happens then is competition starts, that the supermarkets and the retailers will need to step up to provide superior quality product to make sure that these consumers stick or go back to them. Right? And at the end of the day, that's where the economic model comes into place, around competition. It can be disruptive, but it could also well be just integrated into our everyday lives as is. And that's the future to be seen how this technology. Granted, when I first heard about it, it sounded like science fiction and Star Trek, but it's actually you have it in your bag, so it's actually real. And so let's see where it goes. Let's just get this started, get this in the hands of people, start empowering individuals, and really get a better understanding of what good food is. Right? So yes, I'm talking as the head of the Blockchain Association, but also as father of a 6-year-old. I would love for him to be able to get access to the best food for his entire life. Right? And if we can add a little bit to that by adding the technology there which enables this, I'd be super proud of this.
And I think from the point you're making, it's the layers of players between the grower and the buyer where those extra 5-10% are constantly being added. And so I know you've been working in short supply chains for a long time. It does look like it's going to be more efficient to have short supply chains if we engage this competitive framework based on quality. So I think a lot of the incentives of the sustainable ag community can be accomplished through this endeavor, systemically, globally. So yeah, it just feels very promising.
So I still, we are here in a temple of poultry. So there are a lot of service providers for producers of chicken meat, but also eggs. And I have a really good friend in the Netherlands that it's not a large scale farm. He has like 250,000 chickens, so he has 200,000 eggs a day or so. And I know what the impact for him is, getting like a half a cent or a cent on top of his normal market price. It's massive. But basically what we are presenting here, that if it's adopted by the sector in poultry, and you're actually giving the chicken better food that probably cost them more in the beginning, because they have all these chains, so we can go to the farmer, but then also the people in the middle that process data, make decisions, develop technology. Can we integrate, well, some of the technology on nutrient density measurements and the blockchain technology for the poultry industry as well? Is it possible?
I've been working with some very, very large global multinationals on this question of chickens and eggs. We did a lot of research on beef, and as a corollary, we're looking into other animal products. It looks like what chickens are currently fed in these large-scale systems does not optimize chicken health. And I've been talking to these big corporates in North America, and they're not so much concerned about the nutritional caliber of the egg or the chicken breast. They're much more concerned about bird flu. And they're like, okay, great. So we can talk about how much, whatever it is, beta-carotenes in the egg, but we just killed 2 million birds last week because of a bird flu outbreak. So there are major costs of production in this industrial system that are foundationally coming from the fact that it is not done in harmony with life as much as it could be. So when we look at the nutrient levels in an egg, and we look at something as simple as the omega-3, omega-6 ratio, we understand that when you feed certain types of grain to chickens, you're going to have a very unhealthy omega-3, omega-6 ratio for the consumer. Actually, if you take those whole grains or different whole grains and you sprout them, in the process of sprouting them, you actually increase nutritional bioavailability, and in so doing, you rebalance that omega-3-6 ratio. You provide an egg or meat that is nutritionally superior, as well as providing greater vigor and vitality and resilience for the chicken. So you have less death, you have more weeks of egg laying before you have to cull the flock. There's the biggest problem for the farmers is their cost, right? So what I propose, again, as a farmer, if I can decrease my cost and maintain my sale price, I dramatically improve my economic viability. And I would say, as a farmer, there are many things that we've been sold that are not in our economic best interest. In many cases, there are solutions which are less expensive to us, which will improve the system function of our operations, and we need not necessarily be receiving premiums. There's a group in France. We'll be releasing our treaty on the definition of nutrient density tomorrow in Rennes, in France. It's a group called Blue Blancourt. They are the only certification label on the planet I'm aware of that focuses on the nutritional caliber of food. We were just walking in the shops in France a month or so ago with the founder of the Blue Blancourt Association. He was showing us that the eggs with the Blue Blancourt label were less expensive than the eggs from the conventional supply chain. They were nutritionally superior, and when they were actually produced on scale, because of the economic improvements for farm viability, we could have a decreased cost for the consumer with an increased nutritional caliber. This is one of the unlocks that I don't think people appreciate. There's always this concept about optimizing cost and getting premiums for better. What we understand from biological systems principles is when things are functioning more well, the cost of production is lower. So we should be able to outcompete a chemistry paradigm with a biological paradigm. It's life that evolved animals. Only when we operate in harmony with life, or to the degree we operate in harmony with life, the degree of our economic viability improves. So yes, I appreciate the concept of premiums. I grew up in the organic movement. That was always a thing. We're better, we should charge more. When I talk to major global multinationals, they say, guess what? Price is massively important. You have to be able to maintain price points. If you want to improve market share, you can't be charging premiums. You have to maintain price points. What we understand, and this is the opportunity, if we have all these farmers globally engaging in this open data collection framework and sharing, not having that metadata be proprietarily controlled and connected to selling of products, but for a horizontal open framework for farmers to be sharing and learning, we still are going to be needing to buy things. But let's buy things that optimize our system function, that decrease our cost of production, which improves our economic viability, which improves the nutritional caliber of the food, which improves the health of our consumers, which improves the ecosystem function, the carbon sequestration. These things can, I call it the double bottom line. It's entirely possible. In fact, it sure looks like from the data that soil health, ecosystem function, farm viability, nutrition, flavor, aroma, human health are different facets of the same gemstone, right? They're not separate things. You don't have to sacrifice one for another. They actually are intrinsically interrelated. We just haven't had a process by which we can build those data sets to tease that out, because biological systems are inherently multi-factor systems. And the way we've been engaging data and research has been a single factor, replicated randomized trial, much more of an abiotic set of paradigms than a biological paradigm. This is where the open, collaborative framework for assessment and data collection is absolutely revolutionary and transformative.
Sounds amazing. Can you respond to that, Hans?
Yes, again, from two angles. I'm just sticking to these two terms, disruptive and integrative. So, yes, so if we're looking at Dan's example, absolutely, it's going to be disruptive because it's empowering bottom-up, so it's empowering the individuals and the farmer. But also going back to your friend in the Netherlands, but I'm not a food expert, by the way, right? I come from tech and education, so for me, 250,000 chickens sounds like something mind-blowing, and you mentioned it was small, so I trust you on that. But what we've done, there's a partner company in the UK that is building on BSV blockchain that has integrated the technology in such a way that it also benefits the farmer in this existing model, right? So what they've done is essentially have sensors throughout the entire farm, which measure key data such as humidity and temperature, etc. And they have AI cameras with computer vision that are actually monitoring the behavior of the chicken itself. So for example, if they see the chicken huddling up, they see it, the AI will pick it up as a sign of distress. And they look at the behavior of the animals, individual as a group. And that is all essentially trying to monitor this AI that makes decisions autonomously, right? But as we all have been familiar with AI, can we trust it? And the answer is no, and this is actually what this blockchain, this verifiable layer comes in. So what they've done is, together with this chicken farm in the UK, is build out this system where AI makes autonomous decisions based on sensoric data and based on chicken behavior that is found in the camera, adjusts all the variables to make sure that the conditions are right. And to add this level of trust, they track all the data onto the public ledger to make sure that the attributes that led to this decision, plus the decision itself, plus the action and the outcome afterwards are all monitored. What they actually achieve, again, and it goes back to the disaster recovery, is a 30% reduction on the insurance premium, because it's a liability question now. It's not a liability normally in the farm, but the liability is actually in the entire technology system. Right? So blockchain plays a very fundamental role, again, in data integrity, because nobody can tamper with it, it can't be changed. So again, coming back, it can be disruptive and it can be integrated, but the potential is just enormous if you understand what the value is for the individual business or user that is trying to use it.
Thanks. You touched a really important element of like nutrient density, soil health equals animal health equals human health. I know that in the Netherlands we pay, I think, 25% of every euro that is being made there, it goes to healthcare. Well, you just explained with the case of chickens that if you adjust what they eat and how they are taken care of, they don't get flu or get less flu. And it's the same for humans, I presume. And so the interesting thing is, if we spend like 5 or 10% of our money on food and 25% on medicine and healthcare, is there a business opportunity for food producers as well, through the data of nutrient density, to get some of those rewards back?
If we're operating in an honorable and holistic system, I would propose yes. Coming from the US, I'm cynical about whether we operate in an honorable, holistic system. But yeah, I think absolutely. This is part of what Blue Blood Growers has done, as they've shown with their human health trials, that when they shift what the animals eat, and then therefore shift the biochemistry of the part of the animal that we eat, we shift the disease incidence, the inflammation markers, the susceptibility to chronic ailments. We have the literature in the science which shows that these things are intrinsically interrelated, It's beyond my sort of set of things I've conceived as of yet to understand how that would, decrease in medical costs would go back to farmers necessarily. My primary focus is that the farm viability is improved, the soil health is improved, the ecosystem function is improved, and human health is improved. So we all have our pieces of the puzzle we're focusing on.
And the question now is, how do we bring the pieces of the puzzle together to create a food system that serves all? That's where we stand, and that's possible.
Yeah, and our thought is, until we actually have a definition of nutritional caliber in food, let's say 1 to 100, it says this egg is at the 20th percentile, this was at the 53rd percentile, this was at the 82nd percentile, until you can actually say there is a continuum of nutritional quality in food, which is everything we understand, it just hasn't been defined. And we can create the metrics to measure it. We can't align the economics of the supply chain to incentivize for optimized nutritional caliber, which is decreasing cost of production, which is improving soil health, which is improving human health. Right? We actually need to engage the process collectively, openly, transparently, in defining that 1 to 100 standard, which, based on our work in beef, it sure looks like ecosystem function, farm viability, human health are the same thing. That's outside of what's been done currently in our agronomic research. Agronomic research is over here, human health research is over there. In many cases, the incentives behind the research are driven by the funders, and the funders are people selling products, not trying to optimize system function. And so we've got a finger on the scale, which is perhaps not asking the right questions. But yeah, presumably we can engage the science to come up with these definitions and establish metrics. We think a massive suite of unlocks can occur.
So to wrap it up, I think there's one interesting question. Is okay, we have been talking about data and factual evidence of this function, nature function in our food system, but you need two elements to make it work. One is you need to have the facts in place and measure the effects. And two, you need a massive crowd that is willing to adopt that truth as part of what they think should be rewarded. And without going into deep, because we went now into like the technical aspect of food and nutrition and how to make it, do you see, because you travel the world, a movement growing to adapt these value propositions in their own society? What is to wrap it up, both, the thing that is happening in our world at large?
Yeah, this is literally the 6th continent I've been on in the last 2 months. We've been engaging this conversation around the planet. What we're finding is there is what seems to be a deep hunger for this understanding, and people are struggling with the fact that they don't actually have a way to discern. So our idea is, let's engage step by step. Let's actually engage a proper framework, a rigorous, empirical, properly scientific framework of discerning relative quality. Then we can work with the supply chain to develop instrumentation, to collect metadata, to identify causal factors. But I'd like to say, the plunger pay principle seems to apply. The more struggle and suffering occurs, the more receptivity there is to shift. As well, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs seems to apply. People are primarily driven by, basic survival. And the greatest good for all is something we worry about much later than, how can I pay the bills and keep the kids fed and keep a roof over us. So if we can align that, interest of less pain from disease and those sorts of dynamics, or economic viability from farmers with these deeper systemic benefits. What we're finding is that there's a real hunger globally. I'll just say, for those who are interested in engaging the process, bionutrientinstitute.org is the URL where this treaty is housed. Anyone globally is welcome to offer comments and critique. If and when you find the document to your liking and you want to put your name on it, the more people who are willing to sign it and say, I support this endeavor, the more readily we'll be able to raise the funds to do the research and move forward to the next steps.
Okay, thanks. Els, on moving masses of people engaging in this system, what can the BC blockchain add to that?
It's the enabler at the end of the day. It's, like I said, it's the underlying infrastructure that enables all of this moving. So what we see is, in general, obviously I come from the tech perspective, what we see in general is a lot of, with increased education and awareness and increased sort of lack of trust in this world, and that goes beyond the food industry, is that there's a strong need coming for blockchain as a utility, that we need to have some form of layer of trust embedded into our lives. Right? So that's a big movement that's coming up. But it starts with identity at the core, as I said. If we can get, say, start with 1,000 people to sign up to Dan's initiative for working with common source, with these apps launching in the near future, and actually empower these individuals, we need to prove it at the end of the day. We need to empower these people to actually get this going. So I'll be one of the first to read and sign this and make sure to share it with friends and family. But if you think of it, like, if you think of it not as a role as business person, if you think of us as just a human, we're all parents or uncles or sons or daughters of people who we want to be able to have a good future. We want to have a nutritious food, have a good quality of life, less disease for everybody, less allergies and intolerance. And I think this is such a powerful message. And like Dan said, he's been traveling for the entire continent. He hasn't met a single person here at the boardroom that doesn't agree with, yes, the nutritious value of food is important. It's just a human value. And blockchain is just the enabler that empowers these people to share that data, to connect. So we're, again, a very humble position, but very proud and honored to be part of this and to be able to enable this. And I think the time is right now where we see this shift in momentum. From a human perspective, technology is getting ready for it. So the future is bright.
Thank you for the assignment. The future is bright, we need to do it together. And it starts today. And we'll achieve it tomorrow. Thank you very much.